So today we're going to unpack a really powerful story that's been making the rounds online. It's all about a massive spiritual shift happening, supposedly, right in the heart of Europe. And believe me, it starts somewhere you'd probably never expect. Yeah, it all kicks off with words just like these. This quote, it's attributed to a former Italian nun. And it really just sets the stage for the incredibly personal journey we're about to get into. So let's dive right in. All right, so where does this all begin? Well, according to the sources we're looking at, it doesn't start out in the busy world. Nope. It starts inside the quiet, hidden-away monasteries of Italy. This is where a really deep, personal search for something more was apparently kicking off. The story goes that, on the surface, everything looked normal. Daily prayers, devotion, the whole routine. But underneath all that, a lot of these nuns were feeling this emptiness, this restlessness of the heart. It wasn't that they weren't disciplined. It was this gut feeling that a key piece of the puzzle about God was just missing. And this feeling, this unrest, it was apparently driven by some really big questions. The first one, according to the account, was a real biggie. Why does God, the Almighty, have to appear in human form? This idea, which is a foundation of their faith, was starting to cause some serious internal conflict. And then there was another one, the whole idea of original sin. Why is every single baby born already carrying this flaw? The sources say the nuns really grappled with that. Does that seem fair? Where does that fit in? And asking these kinds of questions, well, that's what set them off on a completely new journey. So, what do you do when the answers aren't coming from within your own tradition? Well, the story goes that a group of these nuns started looking elsewhere, in secret. They began exploring a totally different faith, hoping to find a new way of looking at these huge questions. And this is where things get really interesting. The account points to this major fundamental difference. On one hand, you have the concept of the Trinity, but on the other, in Islam, you have something called Tawheed. It's this idea of the absolute complete oneness of God. No partners, no parts, no intermediaries. And for these nuns, this was presented as the simple, direct answer they'd been looking for all along. This particular verse from the Quran is pointed out as being a real game changer for them. You can see why. The message is just so clear, simple, profound, and, as the source describes it, very logical. It just clicked for people who were struggling with some of the more complex ideas in their own faith. Okay, so the real turning point, the moment everything changed, apparently came during a university lecture. A Muslim professor was talking about Tawheed, but then he also explained how much Mary is revered in Islam. I mean, get this, there's an entire chapter of the Quran named after her. For the nuns who were there, hearing this was supposedly just an absolute bombshell, a really emotional, overwhelming moment. So you have this private journey, these secret studies, this huge emotional connection. Where does it all lead? Well, it leads to a huge, public, and pretty dramatic moment. Everything that was happening in whispers was about to be shouted from the rooftops. The source describes this incredible scene. Just try to picture it. Thousands of nuns, still dressed in their habits, all gathered together in a massive hall. But they weren't there for mass. They were there to do something incredible, to publicly and altogether declare their new faith in Islam. And how did they do it? By saying the Shahada. If you're not familiar, this is the declaration of faith in Islam. It's simple, it's powerful, and it's the formal step you take to become a Muslim. You just say these words, and you mean them in your heart. And the scene afterwards is described as just unbelievably emotional. We're talking tears of pure joy, nuns taking off the crosses they'd worn their whole lives, and this overwhelming shared feeling of peace, a peace they felt they've been searching for forever. So it's important to note, the way the story is told, it's not about rejecting something, it's about finally coming home. Okay, so here's where the story zooms out. The sources we're looking at don't present this as some one-off crazy event. No, they frame it as just one piece of a much, much bigger trend that's supposedly happening all across Europe. We're moving from one dramatic story to a whole social movement. And that brings us to a really eye-popping statistic from the material. Get this, 60%. 60% of Europeans who convert to Islam are women. That's a huge number, and it definitely flies in the face of a lot of stereotypes. So you have to ask, what is going on here? What's driving that? And to back this up, the account gives a bunch of other examples from all walks of life. I mean, you've got a former MTV host from Germany, a well-known Greek atheist who used to debate against religion, a bartender from Poland, even a former Catholic priest in France. The point is, these stories are coming from everywhere. So, back to that 60% number. Why so many women? Well, this quote from another female convert gives us the explanation offered in the source material. The idea being presented is that for some, Islam offers a kind of liberation, a freedom from the constant pressure to look a certain way. It's about being valued for who you are, for your mind and character, not for your appearance. But, it's not all sunshine and roses. The story is clear that this journey can be really, really tough. The last part of this narrative gets into what it's actually like to be a new Muslim in Europe today. That inner peace they find can often clash with some pretty harsh realities out in the world. And I mean, it can be incredibly challenging. The account is upfront about it. Converts can be rejected by their own families. They can lose their jobs. They can feel totally alone. The material presents these struggles as a real test of faith, which just goes to show how deep their conviction must be to get through it all. But even with all those hurdles, the story ends on a pretty optimistic note. It talks about this new generation of European Muslims coming up. These are young people, born and raised in Europe, super smart, totally integrated, and really focused on being a positive force in society, all while being proud of their faith. Which brings us right back to the central question this whole narrative leaves us with. When you hear these stories, what do you see? Is it a threat, a cultural shift to be afraid of? Or is it what the source material argues it is? A massive spiritual awakening, a search for meaning that can't be stopped by borders or politics. That's the big question to think about.